That sentence has haunted me for 33 years. But tonight, under the unblinking lights of a live congressional hearing broadcast across America, I finally said it out loud. And my father was sitting right there, front row, jaw clenched, Medal of Honor pinned to a chest full of secrets. I'm Camille Hargrave, age 55, former U.S. intelligence officer, daughter of Major General Thaddeus Hargrave, hailed hero of Desert Watch 92, and the man I once believed was carved from the bones of justice. But the truth? He built his legacy over the bodies of people he left behind, including mine. The hearing room felt like a tomb, cold, sterile. Every eye locked on me as I adjusted the mic and looked directly at the committee chair. Before I proceed with my sworn testimony, I began. I want the record to reflect that the man sitting in row 1, seat 2, is my father. And what I'm about to say will destroy everything you think you know about him. Gasps. Pens froze mid-note. Even the stenographer hesitated. I didn't flinch, because I'd already lost everything once. And this time, I came prepared to lose it all again, but on my own terms. Let me take you back. Back to 1992, when I was just 22. A fresh recruit in U.S. Army intelligence. I had been stationed in Nevada, working in a joint task force that monitored encrypted satellite transmissions connected to Operation Desert Watch. It was meant to be routine signal monitoring, until I saw the unmarked files scroll across my console. Operation Spearfall confirmed civilian casualties. Black Site Echo 6. Eyes only. I shouldn't have seen it. No one my level should have had access. But the system glitched for exactly 7 seconds. 7 seconds that changed everything. Because that file didn't just implicate anyone. It bore the authorization stamp of MGT Hargrave. My father. At the time, I convinced myself it had to be a mistake. A copy-paste error. A name mix-up. My father was decorated. Revered. He gave speeches about ethics and command code. He was America's military spine. But something wouldn't let me sleep. I dug deeper. Quietly. Carefully. Like an addict tiptoeing back to poison. Within weeks, I traced that document to a secret operation in Basra, one that allegedly rescued American operatives and neutralized local threats. But there were no threats. Only a makeshift hospital. And 23 civilians. 23 innocents turned to collateral damage. And worst of all, the op wasn't authorized. It was covered up. I confronted him once. Just once. Thanksgiving 1992. My mother was still alive back then, still playing the perfect colonel's wife, eyes full of practiced silence. I cornered him in the study, holding the printed satellite report like it was radioactive. Did you authorize this, Dad? He didn't even look at it. You have no idea what command means. Did you lie to the entire country? I pressed. His answer? Loyalty is doing what needs to be done, especially when others don't understand. And just like that, the door to our relationship closed. He didn't slam it. He just locked it from the inside. I left the military 3 years later. Honorably. Quietly. But the file never left me. Over the years, I tried to forget. I built a career in cybersecurity. I married. Divorced. Lost my mother to cancer in 2008, and at the funeral, he didn't even look me in the eye. But in 2023, I was diagnosed with stage 2 lymphoma. And when I stared at the MRI screen in that cold, sterile room, I realized something. I might not make it out of this life clean, but I'd be damned if I let the truth die with me. That's when I contacted a journalist. Not just any journalist. Eli Marsh, Pulitzer-nominated, tenacious, and the only one with the guts to believe me without blinking. Together, we gathered declassified records, anonymous testimonies from retired officers, satellite imagery, and even a deathbed confession from a man who piloted the chopper that bombed Echo 6. We built a case, so airtight you could hear it breathe. And we made it public. The military tried to stall. Lawyers were hired. Threats were made. I received a letter marked confidential, cessation request with my father's initials at the bottom. But I pressed forward. Because this wasn't about vengeance anymore. This was about a girl who once believed in honor, watching the man who taught her that word rewrite it into a weapon. Back in the hearing room, I raised my eyes from the mic and found his gaze. Still steely, still proud. But this time, there was a flicker of something else. Fear? Guilt?
No.
Recognition. He knew this was the moment he could no longer outrun what he'd done. The truth, I said slowly, voice steady, is that I've carried this story like a body on my back for 3 decades. And if it takes burning every bridge in this room to give those 23 names the dignity they were denied, then strike the match. The chamber went silent. Then Eli stepped forward. He read aloud the names. All 23. A mix of Iraqi doctors, nurses, and 2 children, ages 7 and 5. When he finished, he whispered, "Loyalty doesn't mean silence. Loyalty means justice." As I walked out of that chamber, my father remained seated, metal shining, but the man behind it, dismantled. And for the first time in my life, I realized something so painfully clear it nearly brought me to my knees. He taught me loyalty, but he never taught me truth. So I became it. 3 days after the hearing, the threats began. Not from unknown enemies. Not from nameless internet trolls. No. These came in embossed envelopes with Department of Defense letterheads and careful, cold signatures. The first read: "You are hereby notified that your prior access to classified materials is under formal review pending the outcome of an internal investigation into your testimony on March 18th, 2025. Translation? They were trying to silence me, but the damage was done. I had ignited a fire that couldn't be buried under national security clauses. News outlets were dissecting my every word. Editorials branded me both hero and traitor. Old colleagues from my intelligence years left cryptic voicemails, half in support, half in fear. My father? He said nothing. Not a call. Not a statement. Not even a denial. But silence was always his sharpest weapon. I stayed in my apartment in D.C., curtains drawn, phone on airplane mode. The only person I allowed in was Eli Marsh, who arrived each morning with coffee, updates, and fresh reasons to keep going. He read one headline aloud. General Hargrave's daughter accuses hero of war crimes. Then another. Whistleblower or family betrayer? And finally, Camille Hargrave's truth could bring down a generation of command. He glanced at me. They're starting to dig, Camille. Really dig. This isn't just about one op anymore. They want to know who else knew. I closed my eyes, because I already knew the answer. Almost everyone in his circle did. 33 years ago, my father didn't act alone. I remembered names. Brigadier General Sutton, Colonel Diaz, Lieutenant Reed. They were the men who toasted to acceptable sacrifices at our dining room table after the news reported a successful intel extraction in the desert. They all wore smiles that night, except my mother. She stood at the kitchen sink, wiping the same dish for nearly 20 minutes, her knuckles white, her eyes hollow. Now, with Mom gone and Dad buried beneath medals and myths, it fell to me to pull the rot from the roots. I met with a Pentagon investigator named Talia Rowan, a woman younger than most of the secrets I carried. Sharp, deliberate, and deeply uncomfortable with what I represented. She slid a file across the table. We found inconsistencies in the mission reports from '92. But there's no video, no remaining field comms, and your father claims you misinterpreted the satellite data. I laughed bitterly. They always bet on the fog of memory, don't they? Talia didn't smile. Camille, if you're asking us to take down an icon of American military history, we'll need more than anomalies and recollections. We'll need witnesses. I leaned in. Then you better clear your calendar, because they're ready to talk. First came Reed. He was dying of ALS, barely able to speak, but his whisper over the phone chilled my bones. We left bodies. I begged Thaddeus to call it off. He said the mission mattered more. Then came Diaz, who had quietly retired to Florida and had buried 3 divorces and a pill addiction under his silence. He sent me an email with 4 words, "I'll testify." For her. Attached was a scanned photo. It showed a young Iraqi nurse holding a child, both covered in dust. She was 26, he said later, the youngest among them. She begged us not to fire. They fired anyway. As more pieces surfaced, my father's image began to wobble. But it wasn't until the photo emerged that everything shifted. It was an old, time-stamped image from the night of the op, leaked by a military archivist with a conscience. It showed my father standing at the edge of the Echo, sick sight, staring at the wreckage, arms crossed, smiling. The image went viral in minutes. Even the most patriotic networks had to ask, was the mission heroic, or was it murder? Then came the hardest moment of all. A letter slipped under my apartment door. No return address. My name in black ink. Inside. I loved him too. But you did the right thing. He stopped being our hero when he stopped being human. Signed, MH. My half-brother. The secret child we were never supposed to know about. Born from an affair in 1989, hidden with hush money and overseas deployments. He had known the truth about Echo, since he was 16. He had stayed silent to protect a father who barely claimed him. Now he stood ready to stand beside me. The hearing was reopened. More witnesses. More evidence. And the moment came when they asked me the question I had feared from the start. Do you believe your father should be stripped of his rank and honors? I swallowed the fire rising in my throat. I believe, I said slowly, deliberately, that no one should wear a medal built from the bones of the innocent. By the end of the week, the Pentagon announced a full review of Operation Spearfall and an ethics investigation into General Hargrave's conduct. They didn't revoke his medals, but they revoked the silence that once protected them. I stood on the steps outside the chamber, wind cutting across my face. Eli stood beside me. You did it. I shook my head. No. I just lit the match. Now the truth has to burn its way through the rest. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I got the call. He wants to see you, Eli said, voice tight. Your father. I froze. For a moment, I couldn't tell if it was relief or dread that flooded my chest. Where? Walter Reed. Private ward. It's not public yet, but he collapsed this morning. Possible cardiac event. They think it's stress-related. I didn't respond. I just stared out the window as snow flurries began to dust the rooftops of D.C. 33 years of silence, rage, and buried grief boiled beneath my ribs. And now he wanted me, the daughter who detonated his legacy, to stand at his bedside? Fine. Let him see what the truth looks like in full light. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and memory. I walked through corridors that once housed wounded soldiers who whispered confessions to me in secret, back when I wore a uniform. Now I was just a visitor with scars the military couldn't see. A nurse led me into a private room. There he was, Thaddeus Hargrave, the man whose shadow loomed over my entire life, now shrunken beneath oxygen tubes and heart monitors. The medals were gone. No crisp uniform. Just a pale gown, and foredrip, and eyes that flicked toward me with a flicker of something I couldn't place. Camille, he rasped. I didn't sit. Why now? His lips twitched. A failed smile. Because the world finally heard your voice. I figured I should, too. The nerve of him. To reduce my revolution to a voice. I stepped closer, my boots echoing on the tile floor. I didn't burn your name because I wanted revenge. I did it because silence was killing me, killing others. He closed his eyes. You were always so idealistic. No, I snapped. I was loyal. You taught me loyalty meant obedience. But it doesn't. It means telling the truth even when it ruins you. He coughed, then winced. You destroyed everything I built. I knelt beside his bed. No. You built it on graves. I just pulled back the tarp. He looked at me then. Really looked. For the first time in decades, there was no rank, no fatherly scorn, only an old man staring at the daughter he thought he had buried beneath silence. Did you ever wonder, he whispered, why your mother stayed? Every day, I said. She died full of secrets. He nodded slowly. She knew. About Echo 6. About the child. About everything. I told her to forget it. And she did. Until you came home with questions. I stood, breath catching. She stayed, he said, because she believed in me, not the general. Me. And I failed her. The pain in his voice chipped away at something cold in my chest, but not enough. Then say it, I said. Say what you did. He looked away. You want a confession. A legacy written in ash. But all I can give you is this. I made decisions that cost lives. I chose silence to protect the system. And in doing so, I lost the only people who ever saw me as more than a rank. It wasn't the admission I wanted, but it was real. We sat in silence for minutes that felt like years. Then I reached into my coat pocket and placed a folded paper on his bedside table. What's that? He asked. A letter of testimony. From MH. His eyes widened. He forgives you, but he won't speak to you. He nodded, a tear slipping from one eye. It was the only time in my life I saw my father cry. When I left that hospital, I didn't feel peace. Not yet. But I felt a fracture begin to close. Not because he was sorry, but because I wasn't. I had stood my ground. I had spoken. I had burned down the fortress of generational silence, and what remained was something I could finally rebuild. Later that night, Eli and I walked by the Lincoln Memorial. He turned to me. If this were the end of your story, how would you want it written? I smiled faintly, as the moment a daughter chose truth over blood, and lit the path for others to follow. Because loyalty wasn't silence. It never was. It was having the courage to speak when everyone else demands you shut up. The storm didn't come from the media. It came from the ranks. Retired officers. Veterans groups. Anonymous messages dripping with venom. You betrayed your father. You spit on the uniform. You're a disgrace to the Corps. One letter arrived with no return address, but reeked of cold cigar smoke. No matter what he did, he wore the flag. You burned it. I stared at it for a long time, then fed it into the fireplace. Because this wasn't about patriotism. It was about accountability. Still, the backlash found its way into my bones. Especially when they started using her name. My mother's. June Hargrave. It began with a phone call from an old friend of hers, Frances Kelly, once her closest confidant during the base years. She'd kept quiet for decades, but now she was shaking. Camille, she whispered, your mother wasn't just silent. She was silenced. I sat upright. What do you mean? She had journals. Pages of them. She hid them. Said if anything ever happened to her, they'd explain everything. My pulse quickened. Where are they? She gave them to me in 2007. I've kept them hidden, but after the hearing, I figured, maybe it's time. I flew to Asheville the next day. Frances lived in a modest cottage nestled into the Smoky Mountains. She looked older, but not softer. Her eyes still carried the defiant gleam of a woman who'd once marched for truth, even when it cost her friendships. She handed me a weathered tin box. Your mother told me you'd come for this one day. I didn't believe her then. The box was heavy. Inside, 7 journals, each marked with years. I started with 1992, and what I read cracked my foundation wide open. They told me it was necessary. Collateral. A tragic, but unavoidable event. But I saw the file. I saw the image. And I saw his eyes that night, empty, detached, like he'd already buried every soul he ordered destroyed. I told him I'd leave. He said he'd bury me in a scandal if I tried. Said my silence was the price of our daughter's future. But Camille is asking questions, and I fear that one day she'll dig up what I was too afraid to speak. God forgive me. My hands trembled. She knew. She tried. And she was threatened into silence by the very man who taught me loyalty. The final journal entry from 2009, months before her death, read, If Camille ever reads this, I want her to know I didn't stay because I was weak. I stayed because I thought I could protect her by staying close to the danger. I thought I could contain him. I couldn't. But I loved you, baby. More than my own name. I wept on Frances's floor. For her. For myself. for every lie woven into my family story. When I returned to DC, I published selected pages, enough to confirm her awareness, her fear, her silencing. The reaction was nuclear. Suddenly, I wasn't just the soldier turned whistleblower. I was the daughter of a silenced woman, the keeper of her final testimony, the legacy she left behind, not in blood, but in ink. Even some of my harshest critics wavered. She didn't just betray a father, one journalist wrote. She avenged a mother. Still, the military remained cagey. The ethics panel delayed its conclusions. Rumors swirled that some brass were working overtime to bury the testimony again. But they couldn't stop what was coming. Because I wasn't alone anymore. My half-brother, Michael, came forward. He agreed to sit beside me in a televised interview, the two children of Thaddeus Hargrave. One from the life he paraded, one from the life he hid. Together, we told the world. He taught us silence. We chose the opposite, and America listened. The final hearing was set for 9 a.m. on a storm-soaked Monday. It was public, broadcast live. America was watching, and so was my father. He wasn't in the front row this time. He couldn't be. He was confined to a hospital bed, reportedly watching from Walter Reed as the legacy he built over 5 decades was dissected under fluorescent lights and camera flashes. I walked in wearing my mother's silver brooch, a small dove, the wings etched with tiny ridges. She wore it to every base event, every promotion ceremony. Quiet, resilient, always watching. Just like her daughter now. The chairman's voice cut through the room. Miss Hargrave, this panel has reviewed all evidence submitted, including testimonies, satellite records, photographic material, and your mother's personal journals. Before we deliberate, do you have any final words for the record? I stood slowly, the weight of generations pressing on my spine. I do. I scanned the room. Rows of military brass, journalists, veterans, and families of those lost. My father taught me many things, how to shoot, how to lead, how to stand in a storm. But the greatest lesson I learned from him was what happens when truth is sacrificed for reputation. Murmurs rippled. Echo, 6 didn't need to happen. Innocent lives were lost, and a machine designed to protect the truth became a shield for its opposite. And when I tried to bury it, it buried me back. I looked down for a beat, then continued. But I rose, because my silence would have been another grave, and I will not be a gravekeeper. I let the words settle. Let this record show that I loved my country enough to tell the truth. Even when it burned my father's name, even when it carved me out of history, loyalty is not silence. It is the courage to speak when silence is more convenient. The panel recessed. I sat alone in the hallway, staring at the tiled floor, until Eli walked over and handed me his phone. It's him. The screen showed a live video call. My father. Thin, pale, eyes sunken but alert. He looked at me for a long time. And then, in the smallest voice I'd ever heard from him, "Did you mean it?" "Yes," I said. Every word. He closed his eyes, tears slipping down the sides of his face. I always thought legacy was about medals, uniforms, salutes. But maybe it's about leaving behind someone strong enough to finish what you couldn't. I didn't speak. Then slowly, painfully, he raised one trembling hand and saluted me. It was not ceremonial, not performative. It was something I never thought I'd see. A father saluting the truth. A man saluting his daughter. That night, the panel released their verdict. General Thaddeus Hargrave would be stripped of all ceremonial honors. His name would be removed from the Department of Defense Hall of Valor. Operation Spearfall would be publicly classified as an unlawful strike. There would be no criminal trial. He was deemed unfit to stand due to health. But the truth? That was judgment enough. The silence had ended. A month later, I stood at my mother's grave with Michael. We brought her journals, now bound into a private archive. "I think she would have been proud," he said. "No," I replied. "She would have been free." And that meant more. In the years that followed, I started an organization, the June Project, dedicated to protecting whistleblowers and exposing buried military cover-ups. We were met with resistance. We were labeled traitors. But we kept going, because the truth is never quiet for long. On the day my father died, the flag at Walter Reed was not lowered. There was number 21 gun salute. But there was a quiet ceremony in my apartment. I lit a candle, placed the medal he once wore in a drawer, and whispered, "Rest, not as a general, but as a man who finally saw the cost of silence." People often ask me if I regret what I did. I tell them this: if you're lucky, you get to live one life, one legacy. But if you're brave, you get to burn down a false one and build something real. And that is how I honored my name, not with obedience, but with fire, with love, with truth.